And hey, we are live. I do hope that this is streaming. I better just make sure I've got the comments coming up. And yes, and welcome everybody. A new time again, 12 o'clock midday, just a smidgen. Although for some of us, it's actually 7 o'clock in the evening. And it's a bit warm because the aircon in this room is died a death. It's working too hard. Or should I not rub that in? Because I understand it's raining quite a bit in the UK.
I couldn't understand to my friends living in Singapore, Laura, when I was asking about their heating. They said, no, we just have aircon. It's like, well, what about heating? We don't need heating. Oh, yeah, of course. Never even constituted such a concept that you never need heating.
I know. Well, when I've gone out beyond the hotel complex and there's Christmas decorations still up. I mean, don't ask me why, but that's probably because of Chinese New Year and all the rest of it. But I'm like, it just doesn't compute Father Christmas and snow and 7-degree heat. But anyway, talking about pressure and heat and all the rest of it.
Great segue.
Human under pressure. Hey, what a segue! What a segue. But yeah, I suppose that there's a lot of pressure in this heat. But high pressure environments, typically we just add more to our plates, don't we? We see that to-do list growing. We see our workload going. We go, oh, we'll stretch the day. We just add more and we keep delivering. That's not really very helpful because gradually we start to be going through motions of ticking things off and start become more of a machine than a person. But what happens in that scenario? When the pressure rises, what capable people do just step into that space, don't they? I mean, that's what happens, don't we?
Yeah,
highly capable people just step in that space and go, right, I can do it.
And you mentioned plates, Laura, right? And it's like all of us have got several plates spinning
as well.
And then all that happens is somebody hands us another one and we go, all right, yeah, we'll keep that one going. And then we keep that one going and then we keep that one going. And while we're busy doing all that, we completely forgot who we are. We've completely forgot what we're doing here, what our future holds, what our vision is, in the title today is the word grounded, right? We lose that grounding. And especially the more and more we go through life and the more responsibility we take on and the more people that rely on us and the more things need our attention and our focus. And suddenly, we start using phrases like time poor and, stuff like that. And we start to accept this is our reality. Well, I'm a successful person. I've got a lot going on. So I don't have any time for me. I don't have any time to contemplate what I really care about, what I really want from my life. So we start going through the motions. And then when something inevitably goes wrong, because that's how life works, right? We can't avoid stress because we lose people, we lose jobs, we lose houses, we lose money, life is decay. Things go wrong. And if we're there and we're spinning all these plates and we've completely forgotten who we are and what we're about, the plates all come tumbling down and we don't know what to do. We don't know what to do about it. We've got nothing. You talk about this, Laura, having that anchor. We've got nothing to anchor ourselves to anymore. So this is when we start getting anxious and overwhelmed and we become short-tempered and irritable because we lose joy in life. Everything becomes about going through the motions and ticking the boxes to get the to-do list done. And none of it is fulfilling and none of it is meaningful to us. So that stuff that lights us up, that makes life worth living, it all disappears out of our life. And then when things go wrong, there's nothing there to ground us, to hold on to say, this is who I am. And we end up just in complete reactive mode. And that just completely knocks us off course. And we don't know how to correct the course because we don't know what the course is. We don't know what the direction of travel is.
And therein lies the problem. And I think that's the thing is we end up hooking ourselves onto those things that are external to us, that we become so far away from effectively ourselves as the anchor that actually we're not anchored anymore. So we're not grounded. And that gap then leaves us then, and then we wonder why we feel I might be putting words into your mouth, but I don't know how some of the men in your group describe it, but I dare say many say, but I just feel empty. And some keep busy because actually in being busy, they don't have to confront that they've pushed so hard for everything external to them.
Try and fill that void with productivity, Laura. Yeah. Then things like work just becomes another ism, all the isms that we grab hold of just to make us feel a bit better in the moment. Whether we're doom scrolling or, whether we're addicted to something like alcohol or whether we have problems with gambling or junk food. It's all the stuff just to make us feel better now because we don't feel any joy anymore.
And that's so true. And Mark, I guess, with the stuff that you do, what do you see? I mean,
well,
do you see those similar patterns?
Absolutely. I think it's, and I was only looking at my client list at the moment. I'm working with an awful lot of men at the moment, an awful lot of men, as opposed to it used to be much more 50-50. And it's very similar patterns. But as Dan was talking, and we all use the analogy of plate spinning, right? Which is a sign of our age that we use that analogy, because there hasn't been a plate spinner on the TV since the very early 90s, right? But the reason why there hasn't been a plate spinner on the TV, but the reason why they haven't been there since the very early 90s is because they've all fucking burnt out. They're done. They're finished. It's over. And yet, because we do use that analogy, but because we always think, well, Jesus, okay, so we're spinning all these plates. I mean, there's another one. God, I better get that one going. I better get that one going. And I was only thinking about board games the other day as an example of this, and because I was playing the game with my daughter, I was looking at. I actually took a picture of the press we have our board games in and the different ones we have. And we used to have Game of Life. Does everyone remember Game of Life? It was like be a winner in the Game of Life was the thing, And I think as a generation we have latched onto that kind of concept. So it's like buy a house, have a car, have family, have status symbols, have a good job, get to retirement. Great, I've done it. I won Game of Life. What's the prize? And we're kind of like we're playing this game for imaginary prizes that don't even exist that we're trying to win, and they're just not there. But we don't know anything else, and I think that's the big challenge with this. We just don't actually know anything else because we think, to the ism point with Dan, right? We think, well, if I work hard, that's fine. If I'm being productive, I'm being useful. If I'm working hard, well, then I have value. If I'm doing this, then I have value. And therefore, we associate ourselves with our value in terms of what we can produce. Yeah. But that's a lonely and a very empty shell at the end of the day. And I think that's a lot of the challenge in this is where we go. Because the amount of people I talk to, and I think this is really interesting in today's world. Years ago, there were certain professions that were very, very busy. It's now nearly every profession. Nearly everyone you speak to is like, God, I'm up the walls. I'm so busy. I have so much going on. I don't know if it's the access to work from home. I don't know if it's the way the phone drags our time and our attention and makes us feel busier for what we're going on. But everything just seems bigger, larger, more hectic, more dramatic. And instead of trying to find how we can fit in, how we can be ourselves in that, we've just tried to fit in. So no wonder we feel
agreed. I think that's something I really, really see. I think you're absolutely right. We are trying to fit into that noise, into that space, because that's how we've been taught. The answers are out there rather than actually go, the answers are in here. And actually, if I start here with what I actually want, really, use Dan's word, joy, and that's my starting point, actually that would keep us more grounded rather than actually trying to look external to us and trying to keep ourselves busy because we're mistaking activity as value and saying, we're only, if we're doing stuff and we're being busy, then we are adding value. But actually, are we adding, and that we're progressing as a result, but are we really progressing? And everything has become urgent. So I guess the question for me, and I guess this goes to both of you, is, what is the question we should be asking ourselves earlier, that stops us going into that sort of washing machine cycle, as I call it, the spin cycle of life or the game of life.
Yeah, and it's funny, isn't it? Because the modern world is just so noisy. That's why everybody feels busy all the time, because we're always on, we're always contactable, we're always connected. And because we're so busy, we don't have time to do that bit of contemplation, to turn our attention to our internal world, right? Which is where we can make real and lasting change. Now, the question I like to ask people, and I literally spoke to a guy today. He's come to speak to me because he's suffering with kind of anxiety and just mild, constant, chronic anxiety. And like from the chat we had, the reason he is because he's completely forgotten who he is, right? So the question I asked him is, what do you really care about and why? You know, what do you want to get from life? And what we're all looking for is ways of feeling, right? None of us knows that because we've all followed the game of life script that Mark talked about there. Get them stuff, get the status, get this, that. And we go, great. We acquire all this stuff. And then we go, oh, well, why do I still feel like shit? And the reason is because we've put ourselves out of shape. Because we're doing things because we think we should and we have to and we must and we ought to. We're not doing anything because we want to, because we've got a deep desire for it, because we're passionate about it and it lights us up. And we all take on these weird beliefs about how we can't possibly earn a living doing something we love, right? But that can't be it. No, work has got to be grind. And yeah, most of us don't like our jobs, but that's okay because it brings us in money to do this, that, and the other. But the trouble is now in the modern world, we don't get the time for the this, that, and the other. We're so busy, we're so on all the time that we're doing the job that we don't like to pay the bills, and there's nothing else in our life because we haven't taken the time to go, well, what do I really want? Like, who am I really? What lights me up? What am I passionate about? What makes my life worth living? What are those things that I do where time just stops still, when you're just so present in the moment that your attention is not on anything else apart from the here and the now? And I remember the first conversation we ever had, Laura, we said to each other, we're not human doings, are we? We're human beings. And this is the thing in this modern world that we've completely lost sight of and touch with, is having space and time just to be.
No, and I think that it's very true. But I think it, you know, I mean, I'm sure a lot of your clients, Mark, you know, when they're stepping into a professional workplace, that's really quite hard sometimes to take that step back and go, I've got to pause because there's somebody else almost setting the agenda.
Well, it's we don't know how to pause, and we think we are vitally important in every single thing that we do. Now, I understand if it's your business and you're running your business, it's very hard in that case, right? And that can be a little bit different because you're a different kind of person when you're running a business. But if you're working in a business for somebody else, you know, we have this sense that I'm the most important thing in the world. If I'm not here, it'll all fall apart. And then we burn ourselves out and we're not there. And guess what? The business doesn't close down overnight. It keeps on going because every single one of us is replaceable in these spaces, but we're not replaceable back in our own lives where we belong. We're not replaceable with ourselves. And like, that's a great question you asked at the start there of Dan, like, you know, what's the question we need to ask ourselves? Like, what do we want, or who am I? Like, who am I is a huge question to ask. Do we want to trying to figure that out at 70 years old, going, God, who am I actually after 70 years of this life? You know, because it's a question of always becoming and discovering in that space. And what I'm thinking there is, like, I was only saying to my wife the other day, it's really oddly, in the last 3 years, I've worked with quite a number of clients who are also farmers. So they're in business, or they have farms, or they farm, or they were farmers, or they're trying to get out of farming and into their business full time. But every single one of them, because they're talking about being incredibly busy. And if you know any farming life, and my mother comes from farming world, you know, it's a 7-day-a-week job, right? It's not a job that you go, you're done, this is it. Like, you know, it's Christmas Day.
Mark, isn't it? It's not a job.
It is. Like, I remember my friend was farming stock and he was coming up to Dublin to work, and his father said, enjoy the half days up there, you know, because that was the reality of where you were. But every one of these guys, despite the fact that they were incredibly busy, like some of them were running their other businesses and they had family, and yet they will always find time for farming. And they said, there's no way I'm giving that up, because that lights me up. Because there's nothing I enjoy more than walking along, checking on the sheep or checking on the cattle or fixing the fence post and feeling like there's something tangible in this, feeling like I'm achieving something. It's my headspace. And that was the thing that allowed them to do everything else. Now, they still needed to find a better structure because there was still I'm so important as this dependency and everything that we need to find. We need to work in a mindset thing. But it's interesting how when you have that, everything feels easier because you're doing something that gives you back your energy. But where our big challenge is because of our identity. And we can identify as the farming part of me is at peace. When I'm farming, I'm at peace. But then we also then throw the identity of when I am working, when I'm running this company, I'm stressed. So we've created two separate identities, and then we're happy to be in this one, but we're unhappy to be in this one. Mm-hmm. How do we converge the identities? How do we bring the person who can be at peace into the person who has to be stressed? Because they're both the same person, but they're just taking a different approach to do different things.
And I'm so with you on that, Mark. And, the number of times I've had conversations with people, but that's just an environment, who you are, as you say, you stepped into that room, that the feeling and the thing that you want to notice is constant. So to Dan's question is, who are you? I actually go, well, what do you want to feel or notice? Because whether you realize it or not, that is driving everything. And that is your constant in whichever room you are sitting in. And if you understand that bit, that's the bit for me that keeps you grounded, because everything else is, just, I would call it a label above the door, but, across the metaphorical room. But, and it's when some of those things change, well, what is it that's changed in the environment? I remember giving this example to somebody who I was coaching a few years ago, and he said, I just can't get my, I go to the office and I can do it all there, and I can be completely focused and I know who I am, and I'm like, but why can't you do that? And he was struggling to work out why he couldn't get into that mindset at home. And I said, what are you doing that's different? And he just said a couple of things. I said, because you're feeling the same thing, you're the same person. All you've done is you've set it up in your mind that it's a different space. Set home up like you have in the office. And it was like, it was like I was saying, like, something incredible, because it's just like I hadn't seen it like that. And I said, but there's nothing different. All it is a label above the door that's telling you that you need to think differently. Why do you need to think differently? You are the same person, just a different environment. But I think that's, it's the whole thing is you can never leave yourself at the door of the office, because you are only one person. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where we struggle a little bit in all of the expectations about the shoulds, about what we should be doing, what we should, and how we get into this cycle of having to do more, because back to the busyness shows that we're making progress and shows that we're successful, and that's what we're all about, isn't it? And so I think the question does need to start much earlier before we get into this cycle, and asking ourselves, what is it that we really want? What do we want to feel? To know.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important question, isn't it? The feeling one, Laura. And I think this is where so many of us are misguided, right? And where we're placing our attention and our focus. And I think, especially with blokes, right? A lot of the blokes I work with can't even tell you how they're feeling, Laura, because they just don't have the words to describe it. Like when I was brought up, I was told my feelings and my emotions were no good to me. It was fluffy thinking. It was, it's about logic and reason and doing things because they make sense, not because of how they make you feel, right? So this is one of the fundamental things about being human. We do everything, every choice and decision we make is to bring us a way of feeling. And just having awareness of the feelings that we're chasing changes the game. It suddenly makes things meaningful and fulfilling because we know why we're doing them. And I think this is the missing bit for so many, and it is for so many of the blokes that I work with. And for a kickoff, they need to be taught the language so they can describe how they feel. Oh, how did that make you feel? It made me feel rubbish, Dan. No, rubbish is not a feeling. Oh, right. You just told me how you think about how you feel. Oh, and they get all confused and they screw their head up, and because they just don't know. They don't know how they feel. They've never had to describe that to anybody. And this is what's missing, right? And I had a conversation with a guy about a year or so ago who came to do a bit of coaching with me. And he said to me, and the first time I met him, he said, Dan, I want to feel like I do on holiday. I want to be relaxed and calm and at peace and content and satisfied. And I said, well, why can't you have that when you're not on holiday? He sort of sat there and he scratched his head and he said, oh, well, because I should do this and I have to do that and I must do that. And I just said, who says? Who says you have to do that? And you know, it's to your point about that environment. And he created a completely different mindset for all sorts of different places in his life. And again, we all do that. We create these masks and these personas for how we show up at work and how we show up at home. And this is when we totally forget about who we are. And I've worked with him for a while to understand where that pressure was coming from, because it's all internal, it's all self-imposed, no matter how much we want to blame this, that, and the other out there. And he realized, oh, I have the power to take away that pressure. I have the power to respond differently. I have the ability to look at my environment, the box, the sign over the door, and decide that makes no difference to how I show up. Now, he realized that obviously while he's on holiday and he's getting his drinks brought to him and he's got no deadlines and nothing to do, that's a different environment, right? But at work, he could still be content and satisfied and have calm and peace and be driven and ambitious and still work very hard to get where he wanted to go. That's the bit he couldn't add up until we did a bit of coaching, until we looked below the surface. He thought being content and satisfied would take away all his drive and ambition. He thought he'd just end up sitting on the beach like he does on holiday. It doesn't, because we're still driven. We still want to grow and evolve and make things happen in our lives. You can both feel that you are enough as you are and still be driven to be more and do more, because life is about who we're becoming. It's not about the game of life and acquiring all the stuff. It's about how that stuff makes us feel.
And my big challenge, is it who we're becoming or is it remembering who we are?
Well,
that's my big challenge. And then that's that, because I think the world is so quick to tell us that we need to be something else, that we forget who we actually are to start with. Anyway, that's my little thought for the day. It's one I've been contemplating.
But is that not an accurate thought, Laura? Because when we talk about the things that light us up, how many of those things that light us up are things that lit us up when we were 10 years old? You know, how many of them are related back to when we hadn't developed the barriers and the armor and the masks and all the rest of it that we portrayed to the world because it was safer to do so. And a part of that is why we get to where we are, why we are suddenly under so much pressure, really busy. And I go for men and women in this space. Like, I know for us men, to Dad's point about feelings, I was one of my first clients and he was running a construction company. I asked him a question. He goes, "You keep on bloody asking me about my feelings. Stop doing that, will you?" I was like, okay, fair enough. You know, how does that make you feel? I'll go away. Like, but you know, women are under sustained pressure. I have to be a mother, or I have to be able to support these people. I have to feed family, and I have to do all this kind of stuff as well as I have to work. Whereas men are like, oh God, well, I have to supply and provide for everyone, right? Because we can't let the mask drop, because we've built it up for so long. That mask is that persona of who we really are and who we think we are all the time. And until we can allow that to slip a little bit and see that the person behind that mask is okay. And it's something I was only thinking about the other day. When I did the TEDx talk a long time ago, I typical of me, it was about 35 minutes long, and I was like, okay, you can't do a 35-minute TEDx talk, right? So I was trying to edit it down. And like, there was one piece I left out of it, because I was talking about the magic of being yourself, and I was talking about how do we get from this back to who we really are. And the ego that stands in front of us all, right? And we all have this, right? Still there. A lot of times, some of us are very prevalent. I met someone today who said, "Your ego isn't important." I would say, look at the president of the US, you know, look at many people follow his ego, you know. But like, my idea was that, you know, you're standing on stage and you're like this, you know, come on, right? Come at me, you know, world, I've got you, you know. But it's not that we're there to attack the world. This is a defensive pose. And we don't see that it's a defensive pose. We're just making sure that we keep this person behind us safe, or this person in here safe. My idea was just to tap this person on the shoulder and go, you know what? It's okay. I've got this. Like, it's all right. Like, I can deal with the world.
There's nothing to defend.
there's nothing to defend. Like, you know, it's like we're already safe. But that's a journey from up there where the ego is defending us to back here who we really are. It's a huge journey of vulnerability because we feel so insecure in it. You know, you cannot use, but will know this too. How many people do you meet looking about coaching, but just so wary of being vulnerable and being exposed and not sure what that's about? And so many people arrive in a coaching space out of crisis instead of out of development and out of growth. You know, and it's such a different experience. If you arrive there going, you know what, things aren't that bad. No, I'm under pressure, but I know I could be better. Great. If you arrive there going, I'm in trouble, you know,
yeah.
Why did you wait till that
You're in
point?
a very different space.
I had to keep myself safe. That's why, because I wasn't ready to say, put my hand up and go, I think I need help.
And it's so true. I think it, you know, we naturally go to this place of, well, everybody else has got it together. Everybody else is fine.
Everyone I've ever met.
Yeah. And you're like, but that's not the reality. But I think
that's everybody with their masks on, isn't it? That's the
well, that's what I mean.
Together. I'm fine. Of course I'm fine.
You know, it's one of those things where, you know, and we play into that narrative. You know, and that's not helpful, because that just then fuels that, well, we've got to do more, which keeps then really capable people pushing and pushing and pushing, but actually moving further away from being grounded. And actually that's not helpful in the grander scheme of things, because we don't make good decisions when we're in that space.
Yeah,
invariably.
And we end up feeling guilty for, you know, you said there's that hole, right? There's something missing. And we end up feeling guilty for that, because we look around us and we go, well, I've got everything. Well, you know, I've got a good job. I've got a few quid in the bank. I drive a nice car. I go on all-inclusive holidays to Dubai. I should be grateful. I should be okay. I should have it all together. Whereas inside, he's telling you something completely different. But that's not because there's anything wrong with you. This is the human experience, right? None of us is broken. None of us needs fixing. There's nothing wrong with any of us, but we've followed the script, and the script is not going to deliver what we truly are seeking from life, the meaning and the purpose and the fulfillment and the feeling like we're making a contribution and we're connected to others and we're part of something that's greater than us. It's not going to deliver us that. And this is why it's so important to turn our attention inward. And, you know, as Mark said there, when people step into coaching, often it's from a place of crisis, but it can be really confronting, because we're looking at ourselves, warts and all, every bit of ourselves, all the shame and the guilt that we've carried around for years, all those bits of us that we hide away because we don't really want anyone to see them, because we were told as a child that's not acceptable, right? I was told as a kid, you're too sensitive, Dan, you need to toughen up. So I toughened up. I built all these walls. I built this bravado and this pretense that I got it all together and I'm strong and I'm tough and I'm not vulnerable or weak in any way, shape or form. And it just ruined me. I ran myself into the floor. And what I've realized since is that sensitivity, that's my superpower. That's what makes me a great coach, because I connect deeply with people. I have deep empathy. And it's only in the last few years that I've fully revealed that to the world, because I hid it for so long. I thought it was something to be ashamed of. I thought it made me weak. And this is, you know, and this is why coaching can be, or even therapy or counseling, really confronting, because you've got to face yourself. But until you do, you're never going to feel life is meaningful and fulfilling, and you're never going to have that peace of mind. You're always going to be trying to outrun it or escape it or avoid it or find another shiny object to fill the hole. Nothing ever fills the hole other than being grounded in who you are.
No, and I think it's very true. I think, you know, the more that you chase, the greater the hole and the less likely you are to be grounded. And I think when you're making life in that, because the bottom line is you can't run away from yourself. Sorry, folks, you can't.
No matter how fast you are.
Pardon?
No matter how fast you are.
No, absolutely. No one's actually achieved it. And you know, and I think that's it. And you know, we can tell ourselves, back to your point, Mark, earlier on about, the work will still be there. The office will still do what it does, whether you're there or whether you're not. We can only make ourselves feel important by associating with ourselves, but actually we need to step back and go, does this really matter to me?
On the idea of groundedness, right? Are we all suffering from a type of homesickness? Because if you look at what we're saying here, we're talking about the need to come back to ourselves, the need to understand who we really are. But, to your point earlier again, Laura, it's about rediscovering who we really were, right? Which is coming home to ourselves. It's kind of my philosophy on coaching. We need to come home to ourselves. But the homesickness we feel is because we are disassociated from that person. There's that gap in between us, and we want to get back to that. But we've naturally lost what that is, or what that was, or what that should look like. Who should that be? Who is that person in that space? How do I find them again? And that's why we have that sense of unease. If we've ever experienced homesickness, like where you're yearning for something that's just not there, or you're yearning for something and you're not sure about how can you get it, And I think it's a very apt thing for where we are in our world. And like we look at our modern world, and I would imagine there's a sense of homesickness across so much of it, because we've all sorts of different issues in our society, from people going, I don't want these people in my home, and these people going, I don't have a home. And then we look for our leadership all over the place, and there's no place to rest our head from a home. So it comes back to who are we, and how can I be who I need to be in this world? But am I willing and brave enough to say that to myself and go, you know what, I need to step back a little bit here, and I need to take that second and to take that time. But how many of us haven't taken a second in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years, in 40 years, because of the speed of everything, until we wake up one day and go, how the hell did I get here?
It's so true, Mark. So true. And it's really interesting because, you look at me and I am here several thousands of miles away. And it's ironic. I took August, or endeavored to take August off last year. I didn't go away. I was at home. And the number of people who couldn't get their head around my being at home, actually trying to step back. Now, my being 8-hour time difference to the UK, and actually physically in a different location, seems to add another layer that people actually have now clicked that I'm away, so don't want to reach out. And yet it was no different in August last year. And I think that has told me quite a bit about how people see taking time out that we need for ourselves in order to be better for, hopefully when I come back super energized, obviously after I've gone over the long flight. But I think that's, I see that with so many people. There's people who try to take a step back and a pause in order to be stronger, but that's just not the normal. And so people kind of don't take that as healthy. That's not the norm, and that's quite a tough narrative to come up against. But as I keep saying to people, when they say, oh God, you're here for 3 weeks, I said, yeah, I'm basically here for somebody else to cook my food, make the bed, and do the cleaning. I mean, frankly, because for 49 weeks of the rest of the year, it all falls on me. And that's my world. But it's completely different to other people's worlds. But people don't get that. And so I think that's part of the measurement bit. And how do we keep grounded? We have to recognize what's true for ourselves. And you touched on this, Dan, in what you've shared, or both of you have. And unless we work out what is true for ourselves, we can't be grounded, because we've got nothing to ground ourselves against. We're grounding against the wrong metrics.
And that grounding, that grounding is what makes us safe, right? And I imagine when people looked at what you did in August and was like, well, why hasn't Laura gone away somewhere? And it's because you don't need to. You're grounded enough in yourself to be able to block the noise out. You did, to Mark's point earlier about feeling like we're important. It's like, well, I'm important, so I've got to stay across what's happening. I need to know. So, you know, in that environment while we're at home, the vast majority of people couldn't just stop the noise. They'd have to just have a little check on the phone or whatever it is to keep a toe in with what's happening. And all this stuff that's nothing to do with us and will carry on without us. But, you know, because we tie our value and our worth to our productivity and our output, we find we don't feel safe enough to step away from it. And we don't feel safe enough to sit still or sit with our own thoughts or contemplate, or safe enough to carve out just a bit of time for us without all the noise, without being contactable, without always being on. And that's the disconnect, right? And this is the problem. You know, Mark talks about us coming home to ourselves and getting this homesickness. And this is what we've all got, right? You know, so many people out there are stressed and they're anxious and they're frustrated and they're depressed. That is all comes from disconnection from who we are. That's all the homesickness, as Mark described it. Because there's a reason why we fail lie detector tests, because lie detectors pick up a stress response, because we don't like lying. If we don't know who we are, every time we make a choice and a decision, every time we bend ourselves out of shape, say yes when we mean no, or do things because we think we should and we have to, we must and we ought to, we're lying. We're lying to ourselves. We're lying to the world. That creates stress because we don't like lying. And then what happens is our words and our thoughts and our actions don't match. And when our words and our thoughts and our actions don't match, we stop trusting ourselves. If we don't trust ourselves, we have no faith in ourselves. So we create all these mental processes. People will recognize it as procrastination or perfectionism, waiting for the right time, and all these things, excuses we make for never actually making some time for ourselves. And when we don't trust ourselves and we have no faith in ourselves, life just becomes hard. Like, who do we have faith in? Whose opinion does actually matter to us? You know, newsflash, yours is the most important opinion. And if you don't trust yourself, you're always going to feel slightly anxious. You're always going to feel a bit overwhelmed. You're always going to be looking around for someone else to do your thinking for you, or to lead, or to show you the way. Like, so many people come to me wanting coaching. They just want to give me a load of money and I tell them what to do. I'm like, that's not coaching. I'm not a consultant. That's not how coaching works. I'm going to facilitate you being able to look at yourself, understand yourself, know yourself, be yourself, love yourself. When you're in that place, that's grounded.
I'm totally with you. Conscious of time as ever, but, you know, final thoughts, Mark.
If you could take down one plate you're spinning, which one's not important? And what's something that you've always wanted to do that lives inside you and inside your heart that you know you love to do and you just don't find time for it? Put it in. Do that thing. See how the world feels when you do that thing. See how you feel. And if you love it, do more of it.
Love that. And so what's that thing you're going to do more of then, Mark?
Oh, Jesus. Well, I tend to do.
Do we need a whole other series then?
I tend to do, like, when you talk about grounded, like, I tend to do the stuff that's good for me, like, you know, because I know that that what lights me up, like, you know, like, it's between going to sport, or it's reading, or it's going to training, or it's doing my qigong. Like, it's, I do the stuff that grounds me. I do the stuff that I love. And I get up mountains. I did, my family were away last week, so I brought the dog up a mountain and, like, absolutely exhausted her. You know, and that's something I love to do. I love to get up a mountain. So I made sure, it's like, God, I need to get up a mountain. When can I get up a mountain? Okay, I'll go that weekend and get up a mountain. So, like, you know, it's like a matter of making sure I fit it in. It has to fit into my life, because that's what matters to me.
And I think that's so true, Mark. It's not, to go back to right at the beginning of this conversation where you said, you know, we've tried to fit ourselves into the world rather than fitting what we need for us first and then meeting the world. And I think that is how we remain grounded, is we start with us and what we need to fuel us before we start trying to fit into the world. On that note, I will love you and leave you for the rest of your day. Thank you as ever, and we will be back next month, same time. Well, no, we'll work on the time, but it will be the same day, 24th of March, time TBC. But thanks as ever.
Thanks all.
Cheers.